seems to be incapable of doing the most basic task just to try and make food service workers' lives easier, but without fail, it happens every single day. And sadly, everyone in the front is looking to leave as soon as possible, and some have already acquired other employment, and it really sucks to see so many awful factors that make good people lose faith in a job so much. Wow, first and foremost, I totally understand where you're coming from, where you deal with stupid customers and you have an awful boss who works remote. Trust me, I have been in your shoes and I know how frustrating that can be. They don't show up to the job you're working, and yet they have the gall to sit at home and boss you around like they know what's going on. Like, that drove me nuts at a previous job I had, and trust me, it's one of the main reasons why I quit. But also, these people are not paying you on time. Like, that's a big red flag that I would never put up with for a single second. Like, you deserve to be paid. No one should ever have to wait for their paycheck, and if that really is the standard that this place exhibits, then seriously, I would find another job, because what you're describing literally sounds soul-crushing and so miserable, and I'm positive that you can find something much better. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out EasyMode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description. An entitled Karen loses her mind on me when I correct her kids and tell them not to destroy public property. And I was honestly astonished by this entitled Karen's entitlement, as well as her claiming that I ruined their vacation, all because I told their kids to start behaving. Here's what happened. So I want to start off by saying cruise ship Karens are for real. After a disappointing buffet dinner of the same food that we also served in the main dining room, we wanted some machine soft serve ice cream. We wandered around to try and find it, and eventually we did. As we approached the machines, there were 3 little kids ages 8 through 11 getting ice cream with no adults present with them. And these kids were not behaving. They were laughing while dumping their ice cream cones on the machine trays, making piles of messes of soft serve and cones, then trying to redo it again and again. There were 4 separate piles of them doing it. The machine was still dripping ice cream from the spout, all because of their bad behavior. So I start to fill my cone with swirl ice cream, and the kids come back before I'm even done. They look ready to cause more stupidity, so I turn to them and I say, "Stop messing around with the ice cream. I saw what you did." I then go and sit down with my husband. Well, a few seconds later, some guy and his kid walk around from behind me, and the kid slaps his hand super hard on top of the railing, separating the walkway from the table that we sat at. The dad also slapped his hands on the support beam while walking. So I guess like father, like son. When they were a few feet further away, I said, "How rude," just like Stephanie Tanner from Full House, only loud enough for my husband to hear. Then, a few minutes later, some 40-year-old old lady in a swimsuit and towel walked in a hurry past us, looking around probably for her lost kids. She then turned to me loudly, forcefully asking me if I was the one who criticized her kids for getting ice cream. I said to her, yes, they were messing around, acting like ice cream cones were toys, dumping their ice cream into piles and thinking it was funny. And when they came back around to try and do it again, I told them to stop messing around, as I saw exactly what they did. That is really bad behavior, and they should be supervised if they're gonna disrespect public spaces that other people use. Well, this entitled Karen literally did not care at all about what I said. She said in response, "Well, my kids are trying to have a fun vacation with their cousin." But I responded by saying, "Well, then you should probably supervise the little kids." She said to me, "Well, someday when you have kids, you'll be annoyed and offended when other people try to tell you how to raise your kids." I said to her that I wasn't expecting some kids to be messing around with ice cream like it's a toy, and that it's her job to supervise them and control them, not other people around them. She says to me, "We were in the next room over in the buffet waiting for the kids to come back to us with their ice cream cones." Then her husband comes over and he says, "Yeah, well, there was some kid walking past her and slammed his hands on the railing, but then she was rude and called them out for it." But like, seriously, I was rude? Some 10-year-old boy was inches away from slapping me instead of a walking rail. The Karen then said, "You shouldn't tell other people's kids how to act or tell parents how to raise their kids. Don't you ever talk to my kids ever again, you jerk." As she leaned over the walkway railing, he grabbed her like a mime with a cane and told her to let it go and walk away. He probably didn't want to see her attack someone at the bare minimum. It was almost like he was done with the argument because he was so used to her acting this way. And this just screams out entitlement, bad habits, constantly not supervising your kids, not enforcing rules of behavior to the kids, not to mention not behaving like adults should, as well as setting a bad example of of behavior for their kids. And she also was making excuses with unnecessary details and was literally trying to deflect blame away from themselves. Now, in hindsight, if the lady had been more calm in her approach, I would have said my thoughts to her among the following. I would have said something like, just because the cruise ship curfew for minors is 10 p.m., it doesn't mean you can let your under 12-year-old kids walk away and simply do their own things, especially after dark. And you know what? Just because maybe they let their kids get treats at the neighborhood market or the corner store at home, all unsupervised by the way, it doesn't mean that they should do the same thing in an unfamiliar environment after dark while on vacation, especially on a cruise ship. I mean, kids left unsupervised will let loose and misbehave because they know their parents aren't watching, but forget other adults might remind them of the rules of society. And you know what? Adding in extra details about being on vacation with their cousins, and I, some total stranger, ruined their vacation because I called them out on their misbehavior and misuse of private property, literally proves that they need to supervise their kids better. I also think it's okay for other people to say sternly that you're misbehaving, that this is for everyone and not just you, so please use it right. And you know what? Just because I didn't have kids or babies next to me doesn't mean she can dismiss my thoughts, because you know what? What I had to say was completely valid. And if that Karen had just been more reasonable, then we could have had a conversation like adults instead of this turning into a shouting match from the entitled Karen. Yeah, that entitled Karen and her kids and the cousin were completely out of line. Just because you're on vacation doesn't mean you get to destroy other people's property, or even public property for that matter. Like, I totally understand you want to let loose and be able to have some fun, but there is definitely a line, and those kids should definitely have not been on their own. So truly, good for the original poster for standing up and saying something, because those kids were blatantly misbehaving, and that's regardless of whatever that entitled Karen tries to say. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not wanting a party thrown at our home that would be hosted by people that we don't get along with? Because right now, I am completely at my wit's end, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So my sister and I had a falling out with my brother and his wife after they would go around telling family members made up awful stories and scenarios about us. There was a big confrontation, and now we don't speak to them. They have always stirred the pot, and my brother still randomly stops by my parents' house, which is where we live, but it's when we aren't home. Now, my mother has always had a soft spot for him and will prioritize his feelings over ours, even though he treats her really badly. He yells at her, curses at her, and has even stolen from her in the past, but she always just says that he's my son and I can't be a jerk like them, and then continues allowing this behavior. Well, yesterday I found out that my brother and sister-in-law are now hosting a party here. I asked my mom why this wasn't brought up beforehand and why she didn't consider how we would feel and what we were supposed to do while they were here. Now, I don't have enough time to write out all the awful things they said about everyone, but more so about my sister. My sister-in-law would call her awful names behind her back and tell people awful and untrue things about her. I know if my sister is in the same room as my sister-in-law, there will be a big confrontation again. I asked my mom why she hadn't considered this since we live here as well. I know ultimately it's their home, but we do pay rent and we were not taken into account. There is close family being invited, so how are we supposed to either stay in our rooms or just not be around or leave until the party ends? It's just insane to me that she's okay with them hosting a party here when they both said the most vile things about my mother as well, with this especially coming from my sister-in-law. After our confrontation, my sister-in-law said that she would never step foot in our house again and that she wants nothing to do with us. But now that they need something because they don't have a home to host a party in, they come asking my mother knowing that she can't say no to him. I told my mother how this made us feel, and she just made it about herself and how much this affects her. I simply asked why there wasn't an alternative presented, like maybe the party being at a park or someone else's house or something like that. And to top it all off, this is a party for a child who's 8 years old. Now, I know my niece isn't at fault, but I truly feel an alternative solution was needed in this case. I again warned her that if they go through with this, knowing my sister, it will not end well. After I expressed how I felt, she literally stayed quiet and said nothing. And honestly, at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Before we go any further, the original poster actually has an update. Here's what they had to say. Okay, so this morning, my mom asked to speak to me and my sister, and she actually apologized for not taking our feelings into consideration. Apparently, last night, she decided to ask my brother if he had considered what we were supposed to do since we weren't invited to a party being held at our house. But when she asked him this, he literally said, "That's not my problem." She asked why we couldn't just get together and work things out for the better, to which he went back to his usual behavior and began saying awful things to her. Now, for the record, I've stated before that I'm fine trying to talk things out because I have nothing to hide. That is, if he's willing to change and make things right. Well, he then told my mom that he's not fixing anything. He said to her, "Deep down, they know they're in the wrong, but it upsets me to no end that you don't see that." He then went on to call us unintelligent liars, and then he threatened to cancel the party and basically said that she's horrible and ridiculous and is making his wife cry. My mom said she had a moment of clarity. She told us that he's clearly afraid of talking to the two of us because he'd have to face the truth of all the awful things that they did. I mean, why else does he deflect and yell at me every time I've asked him to try and talk things out? If he thinks he's going to continue treating me like this, then he's wrong. So she says she ended things by telling him the following: "All I did was ask you a simple question and you couldn't give me a simple answer. If you want to cancel the party, then that's on you. But don't you try to guilt me into compliance anymore." Now, I know it's not realistic to think that she's going to change overnight, but I am glad she was finally able to stand up for herself and actually take us into consideration for once. I'm sure there is more to come since it's my brother, and as of right now, he said he's canceling because my sister-in-law feels uncomfortable. But with all things considered, I seriously need to know, am I the jerk for making a fuss over this? What should I do? You are definitely not the jerk, and I think your concerns were completely valid. Your brother and your sister-in-law are absolutely at fault, and the way they've been treating you is completely inappropriate. And the fact that he would talk to his own mother like that is so devastating to hear, and it's very obvious that he was only using her when he felt it was convenient. Like the sister-in-law saying, "Oh, we're never gonna step foot in your house ever again." But suddenly, when they need something, they're like, "Oh, psych, can we have a party there instead?" And that's just crazy to me because that shows their hand completely. It shows that they don't care and that they're literally only using the mom in this situation so that they can get what they want. So truly, good for you for speaking up and saying your piece, as well as your mom finally seeing the truth, even if just for a second, because your brother's behavior is completely unacceptable, and it's really good that your mom is beginning to that. Am I the jerk for saying my stepmom can't take back how she treated me as a child? Because right now she is trying to insert herself in my wedding, and after I refuse to allow her to play any role in that, I'm now being called a jerk, and at this point I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 24-year-old female and have always had a rocky relationship with my stepmother, who we will call Cindy. Cindy is not her real name. She came into my life when I was 13 years old, and pretty much as soon as she and my dad were married, she became very pushy about taking up a parental role. She came to all of my events and stuff, which I tried to appreciate, but she also had this attitude where she would say, "It's my house too, and I get to make the rules." And this is right after moving in with dad. And I guess she was the bad cop. She was the one who thought I didn't have enough chores, that my grades weren't good enough, and that I needed screen time limits as well as several other things. And that obviously led to a lot of arguments. I hit the last straw when I turned 17 years old. The lawn needed cutting before Sunday, and my dad said that he'd do it Saturday afternoon. So I made plans to go hang out with my friends for the day. While I was out, Cindy messaged me saying I shouldn't have let dad do the lawn because he'd had a very tiring week and that I would be doing it, which is her usual MO basically. I said no and stayed out with my friends, and when I got home, she was furious and tried to ground me, and it turned into this big stupid argument where I pulled out the classic card by saying that you're not my mom. My dad ended up stepping in, and I wasn't grounded, but he did ask me to try and get along with her. But it didn't matter, because she decided that she was done. She just kind of stopped acknowledging me, and we basically became roommates who hated each other. I wasn't even allowed to eat food that she bought, and it wasn't special stuff, but if the bread ran out, for an example, and she was the only one to replace it, then I couldn't have it. It was all just really tense, and I ended up spending a lot more time at my mom's apartment until I went to college. I've never formally blocked her or gone no contact, but we just haven't spoken since. She never came anytime I met with dad or anything like that. That is, until my fiance and I announced our engagement. The wedding is over a year away, but Cindy sent me a long text message congratulating me and asking for all the details so that she could help plan. She was asking about coming to dress fittings, and if we wanted an engagement party, and if she could make a speech at the wedding. Basically, she was asking about all the mother of the bride stuff and pretending the last 11 years just didn't happen. Now, I didn't reply until Dad reached out asking why I didn't. And you know what? I was honest with him. I told him straight up that I'm weirded out by this. I'm happy for Cindy to come as a +1, but she's not getting any role at the wedding. And we're actually not even doing a head table just because I don't want to share a table with her or separate her from Dad. And because she's not my mom. And the last time I saw her, she was insistent about that. And this has turned into a whole thing. He says she's really hurt and that he's rethinking coming to the wedding because she doesn't want to go. I say that she can't take back what happened, and at the very least, she should have apologized before reaching out like this. Mom and my partner are supportive of me, and I've had messages from several people on Dad's side saying that I'm the jerk for punishing Cindy, and it's honestly getting to me. So I really need to know, am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? I don't think you're the jerk at all, because I think what you're asking is not that big of a deal. For starters, the people on your dad's side are completely wrong, and they don't know the details of how Cindy treated you growing up. There was clearly animosity, and Cindy had some weird power trip that nobody checked her on. And that's unfortunate, and that literally is at your expense. So for her to now come into your life and be like, ooh, I'm gonna help you out with your wedding. Let's go dress shopping and do all this other stuff. It's like, I'm sorry, but who are you again? You've played no role in my upbringing, and you literally made my life miserable as a kid. So in all honesty, I don't blame you for saying, hey, you can come to my wedding, but you're not gonna play a role in my wedding, and that you're only gonna be a +1 to my dad, and that's it. Because I think you have it right. She literally should have apologized for the way she treated you. And in my opinion, that absolutely should have been addressed first, instead of her trying to step in as this perfect stepmom that she most definitely never was. My roommate keeps bringing the kids that she babysits over to